The dust storm rolled across the desert like a living thing, swallowing the sun and turning the afternoon sky the color of old brass. Cal Bennett pulled his bandana up over his nose and squinted through the swirling grit, one hand steadying the wild Mustang that danced nervously beneath him. The horse had taken 3 days to break, and he'd be damned if he'd lose it now to a little Arizona weather. Jericho Wells materialized through the haze like a ghost town coming to life, a scatter of wooden buildings huddled against the base of red rock mesas, their facades scoured raw by wind and time. The new railroad tracks gleamed dully at the town's eastern edge, steel ribbons that promised progress and threatened everything they touched. Cal guided the Mustang down Main Street, past the assayer's office and the company store with its inflated price chalked on a board outside. A few souls hurried for cover, holding their hats and shawls against the wind. Through the dust, he caught sight of a yellow light swinging from the porch of a 2-story building, the Canary. According to the painted sign that strained against its chains, the sign broke free just as a woman stepped out to secure it. She wore a practical brown dress and had her dark hair pinned up tight, but the wind had worked a few strands loose. They whipped around her face as she reached for the swinging board. Cal swung down from his horse without thinking. "Here," he said, catching the sign before it could brain her. Together they wrestled it back onto its hooks. "Obliged," she said, studying him with eyes the color of sage honey. "Though I had it handled." "No doubt." Cal touched his hat brim. "Just lending a hand." She wiped dust from her cheek with the back of her hand, leaving a clean streak across the freckles there. "You'll be wanting to stable that horse before this gets worse. Samira Velasquez runs the smithy around the corner. She's got stalls for rent." "I'll be moving on come morning," Cal said. "Just need to sell the horse and resupply." Something shifted in her expression, too quick to read. "Men usually say that." She gestured at the swinging lantern. "I keep this lit during storms, in case anyone loses their way. The Canary serves food until 8, whiskey until whenever Deputy Pike decides we're corrupting the public morals." "That happen often?" "Often enough." She turned to go inside, then paused. "Lila Hart. I run this establishment." "Cal Bennett." He didn't offer more. In his experience, the less people knew, the better. The wind gusted harder, driving sand through every gap in his clothes. Lila struggled with the door, and he reached past her to hold it steady. For a moment they stood close enough that he could smell the lavender soap she used, incongruous in this hard place. "Drifters never stay long in Jericho Wells," she said quietly. "Something about this town runs them off. Maybe they got the right idea." She looked up at him then, really looked, and he saw she was younger than he'd first thought, maybe 30, with fine lines just starting at the corners of her eyes, lines that spoke of squinting into too many sunsets, carrying too many burdens. "Maybe," she agreed, "or maybe they're just afraid of what staying might mean." She slipped inside before he could answer, leaving him standing in the wind with a horse he needed to sell and a past he needed to outrun. The smithy was where Lila had said, tucked between a boarded-up bakery and a tent that served as a makeshift school. Samira Velasquez turned out to be a compact woman with arms like iron bands and a handshake that could crack walnuts. She ran her hands over the Mustang with an expert eye. "Good bones," she pronounced. "Strong heart. You break him yourself." 3 days in the canyons, Cal confirmed. "I'll give you $40 and stable him free tonight." It was fair. Cal shook on it and led the Mustang into a stall that smelled of clean straw and grain. As he unsaddled the horse, his fingers found the worn photograph tucked in his vest pocket. Jacob's face stared back at him, frozen in time, his older brother grinning beside their old homestead in Kansas. Before the railroad men came, before the fire, before everything went to hell. The paper was soft with handling, one corner torn away. On the back, in pencil that had faded but not disappeared, someone had written, "Payment delivered as agreed. GP. GC." Cal had chased those initials across 3 territories in 5 years. Every lead went cold. Every trail disappeared into the vastness of the frontier. But he kept moving, kept searching, because staying still meant remembering, and remembering meant drowning in the why of it all. By the time he made it to the Canary, the storm had settled into a steady blow that rattled windows and sent tumbleweeds cartwheeling down the street. Inside, kerosene lamps cast pools of yellow light over a dozen tables and a bar of polished pine. The air smelled of beef stew, tobacco smoke, and that particular mixture of hope and desperation that clung to mining towns. Lila moved between tables with practiced efficiency, serving bowls of stew and mugs of beer to miners still coated in rock dust. She'd changed into a dark blue dress that looked like armor, all high neck and long sleeves. When she saw Cal, she nodded toward an empty table near the back. "Stew's 50 cents, includes bread," she said when she reached him. "Whiskey's 2 bits a shot, but I water it less than most." "Stew sounds good." Cal laid coins on the table. "Coffee if you have it." "Always." She paused, studying his face. "You've got the look of a man who's been riding hard." "Just working." "Sure." She didn't sound convinced. "That photograph you were studying at Samira's someone you lost?" Cal's hand moved involuntarily toward his pocket. He'd thought he was alone in the stable. "My business." In this town, everyone's business becomes everyone's business eventually. She softened the words with a slight smile. "But I'll respect a man's privacy. Lord knows we all have our ghosts." She returned with a bowl of stew, thick with vegetables and chunks of beef. Real beef, not the stringy range meat most places served. The coffee was strong enough to float horseshoes. Cal ate methodically, watching the room fill up as the storm drove people indoors. A mix of accents drifted through the air: Irish miners, Mexican vaqueros turned railroad workers, German homesteaders, and underneath it all the musical cadence of the Navajo men who came to trade. At one table, a young boy, no more than 10 polished boots with quick, efficient strokes, his eyes darting between customers like he was memorizing faces. "That's Toby Malone," Lila said, following Cal's gaze. "Sharp as a new tack and twice as quick. Knows everything that happens in this town before it happens." "Useful skill. Dangerous one, too." Her voice dropped. "Information's worth more than silver around here, and some people don't like loose ends." The door banged open, letting in a swirl of dust and a man who wore a deputy's star like it gave him the right to own the world. Gideon Pike stood just over 6 feet, with the kind of harsh good looks that had probably served him well until drink and meanness carved permanent lines in his face. His hand rested on his pistol as his eyes swept the room. Well, Pike said, his gaze landing on Cal. "New face. We'll need to have us a conversation about your business in Jericho Wells." Cal kept eating, just passing through. "That's what they all say." Pike sauntered over, spurs ringing against the floorboards. "See, thing is, the railroad company pays me to keep track of comings and goings, especially drifters who might be carrying grudges or looking to stir up trouble among the workers." "No grudge here," Cal said evenly. "Just sold a horse. Be gone come morning." Pike leaned in close enough that Cal could smell the whiskey on his breath. "Maybe I'll just check your papers anyway. Make sure you are who you say you are." Lila appeared at Pike's elbow, coffee pot in hand. "Deputy, you'll scare away my customers. Man's just trying to eat his supper." "Stay out of this, woman." Pike's voice carried an edge sharp enough to cut. "You're already on thin ice, harboring malcontents and—" The coffee pot tilted. Hot liquid splashed across Pike's boots. Lila gasped, all wide eyes and contrition. "Oh, how clumsy of me. Let me get a cloth." Pike jumped back, cursing. "You did that on purpose." "Now, deputy, why would I do such a thing?" Lila's innocence was so overplayed that Cal had to bite back a smile. "Here, let me—" "Forget it," Pike glared between her and Cal. "You," he pointed at Cal. I'll be watching. One step out of line and you'll find out why people don't cross me in this town." He stormed out, leaving muddy coffee footprints. The room, which had gone silent, slowly returned to its normal hum of conversation. Subtle, Cal observed. Lila refilled his cup with steady hands. "Pike's been pressuring me to sell the canary to his associates. I've been less than cooperative." "His associates being the railroad?" "Among others." She glanced around, then slid into the chair across from him. Up close, he noticed she wore a small pin on her collar, a tiny golden key. "There's something coming. Mr. Bennett. The railroad wants this whole valley, every mine, every well, every scrap of land that might have value. Pike's their dog, but he's not the only one." "Not my fight," Cal said automatically. "No, I suppose it's not." She stood, smoothing her skirt. "Finish your supper. Storm should blow itself out by midnight." As she walked away, Cal found himself watching the straight line of her back, the determined set of her shoulders. She moved like someone who'd learned to carry weight without letting it show. He recognized the posture. It was the same one he saw in the mirror every morning. The young bootblack, Toby, appeared at his elbow. "Mister, you want them boots cleaned, only a nickel." Cal looked down at his dust-caked boots, then at the boy's eager face. "Sure, kid." Toby worked with quick, sure strokes, but his eyes kept darting to the door. "You're really leaving in the morning?" "That's the plan." "Shame." The boy spat on the leather, rubbed it to a shine. "Miss Lila could use more folks willing to stand up to Pike. Not many got the sand for it anymore." "She seems to handle herself fine. For now." Toby's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "But Pike's getting meaner, and there's talk of strangers coming from the company. Big men with official papers and guns to back them up. My ma used to say this was a good town before the railroad came. Now," he shrugged, "too young to be so cynical." Cal handed him a dime. "Keep the change." The boy's eyes widened. "Thanks. Mister, you need anything while you're here, you just ask for Toby. I know every secret worth knowing in Jericho Wells." After the boy scampered off, Cal nursed his coffee and watched the room. The storm continued its assault on the windows, but inside the canary felt like a small pocket of warmth in a cold world. Lila moved between customers, stopping to chat, to refill glasses, to break up a brewing argument between two miners with a joke that had both men laughing. She had her saloon, her people, her place in the world. Cal had a worn photograph and a name that might not even be real. He'd be smart to ride out at first light, leave Jericho Wells and its troubles in his dust. That was the rule he'd lived by for 5 years. Keep moving. Trust no one. Don't get involved. But when Lila caught his eye across the room and gave him a small, knowing smile, something in his chest tightened with an unfamiliar sensation. It felt dangerously like the desire to stay. The wind howled louder, and somewhere in the darkness, a sign broke free and went tumbling down the street. Cal pulled out the photograph again, studying his brother's face in the lamplight. Jacob would have liked Lila Hart, would have admired her spine and her stubborn refusal to bow to men like Pike. But Jacob was dead, and Cal had promises to keep. In the morning, he'd ride out as planned. Tonight, though, he'd sit in this warm room and pretend, just for a few hours, that he was the kind of man who could put down roots in a place like this. Outside, the yellow lantern swung in the wind, casting its light into the storm for anyone who'd lost their way. Cal understood the gesture now, understood what Lila was really offering with that beacon. Not just shelter from the weather, but shelter from the loneliness that drove men like him from town to town, always searching for something they'd probably never find. He signaled for another cup of coffee. The night was young, and morning would come soon enough. For now, he'd sit here in the light and warmth, a drifter pretending he had a reason to stay. The storm would blow itself out by dawn, and Cal Bennett, who never stayed long anywhere, would saddle whatever horse he could buy and ride toward the horizon like always. That was the plan. Anyway. But sometimes plans changed. Sometimes a yellow light in a dust storm was enough to make a man think twice about leaving. Sometimes it was enough to make him wonder what staying might cost and whether he could afford to pay it. The gunshot cracked through the morning air like a whip, echoing off the canyon walls. Cal had been saddling a new horse, a steady bay mare Samira had offered at a fair price when the sound froze him in place. In 5 years of drifting, he'd learned to read gunfire like other men read weather. This wasn't a warning shot or a celebration. This was violence with purpose. He moved without thinking, leading the mare quickly out of the stable and toward the commotion near the railroad depot. A crowd had gathered, the kind that forms when something terrible has happened and people don't know whether to run or stare. Through the gaps between bodies, Cal saw Deputy Pike holstering his weapon with the casual efficiency of a man who just swatted a fly. On the ground lay a miner Cal recognized from the Canary the night before, Miguel Santos, who'd been laughing over cards with friends. Now he clutched his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. "You all saw it," Pike announced to the crowd. "Man was drunk, waving that pickaxe around like he meant to use it. I had no choice." "That's a lie." A woman pushed forward Santos's wife, judging by the way she dropped to her knees beside him. "Miguel hasn't touched liquor in 2 years. He was just asking about the new work rules." Pike's hand moved to his gun. "You calling me a liar, woman?" The crowd shuffled back, fear rippling through them like wind through wheat. Cal had seen this dance before in a dozen towns, the slow squeeze of intimidation, the way violence became normal when good people learned to look away. "I saw the whole thing." The young voice cut through the tension. Toby Malone stood near the depot wall, boot shine box forgotten at his feet. His face had gone pale, but his chin jutted out with stubborn courage. "Boy," Pike said softly, dangerously, "you want to think real careful about your next words." Mr. Santos wasn't doing nothing wrong, Toby continued, voice shaking but determined. He was just asking why the company cut wages again when they promised. Pike moved faster than Cal expected, backhanding the boy hard enough to send him sprawling. The crack of flesh on flesh was somehow worse than the gunshot had been. That's when Cal stepped forward. "That's enough," he said quietly. Pike turned, eyes narrowing when he recognized Cal. Well, thought you were leaving town this morning. Drifter." "Was considering it." Cal positioned himself between Pike and the boy. "Seems like I might stick around a bit longer." "Is that so?" Pike's smile was all teeth. "You sure you want to make this your business?" Behind them, someone had helped Santos to his feet. The miner's wife pressed a cloth to his shoulder, whispering prayers in Spanish. The crowd watched, waiting to see which way the wind would blow. "Already is my business," Cal said. "See, I don't much care for men who hit children." Pike's face darkened. "That boy spreading lies about a lawful action? That's sedition. Mr. Railroad Company don't pay us to tolerate sedition." Looked more like a kid telling the truth to me. The two men faced each other in the dusty street, hands hovering near weapons. Cal had been in enough showdowns to know how this could go, blood and gun smoke and someone's mother crying over a fresh grave. But he also knew that sometimes backing down meant something worse than dying. Sometimes it meant letting the darkness win. "Gentlemen," Lila Hart's voice carried across the street like cool water. She walked toward them unhurriedly, Sister Mercy Doyle at her side. The nun's presence transformed the scene. Even Pike wouldn't gun down a man in front of a bride of Christ. Not in daylight. Anyway. "Mr. Santos needs medical attention," Lila said calmly. "Sister Mercy, perhaps you could see to him, and Toby seems to have had a fall. Boys that age, always tumbling into things." She helped Toby to his feet, her hand gentle on his bruised cheek. The boy leaned into her touch like a hurt animal seeking comfort. "This ain't over," Pike growled. That boy's gonna answer for his lies. And you. He pointed at Cal. I want you out of my town by sunset. Your town. Lila's voice carried a edge of steel. Last I checked, deputy. You were a public servant, not a king. Pike took a step toward her, and Cal shifted his weight. Ready? But the deputy seemed to think better of it. Instead, he spat in the dust at their feet. Sunset, he repeated, then stalked away, his spurs ringing a harsh rhythm on the boards. The crowd dispersed slowly, people helping Santos toward Sister Mercy's mission. Lila kept her arm around Toby, who was trying hard not to cry. You shouldn't have done that, she told Cal. Pike doesn't forget, neither does the company. Wasn't planning on it being memorable. Cal said, Boy, all right. Toby straightened, swiping at his eyes with his sleeve. I seen worse. Ma used to say I got a hard head for a reason. Your mother sounds like a smart woman. Cal said, Where is she now? Dead 2 winters back. Fever took her. The boy said it matter-of-factly, the way children learn to speak of loss in hard places. Miss Lila looks after me some now. Lila smoothed the boy's hair. Toby, I need you to run to the cannery. There's a loose floorboard in the pantry, 3rd row from the back wall. Understand? The boy nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. Good. Take what you find there and bring it to Sister Mercy's. Quick now, and stay off Main Street. Toby took off running, his thin legs pumping. Cal watched him go, then turned to Lila. A loose floorboard. Everyone has their secrets. Mr. Bennett. She studied him with those honey-sage eyes. Why did you step in, really? Cal thought about lying, but found he couldn't. Not to her. Boy reminded me of someone. Your brother. The question caught him off guard. How did you... The way you look at that photograph. The way your hand goes to it when you're thinking hard. She smiled sadly. I recognize the gesture. I have my own pictures I carry. They walked slowly toward the mission, the morning sun already brutal on their backs. Cal found himself telling her things he hadn't spoken aloud in years about Jacob, about the farm in Kansas, about coming home to find ashes and accusations and his brother's body in the ruins. They said he was stealing from the railroad company, Cal said. Said he was sabotaging the new line, but Jacob, he just wanted to keep our land our father cleared with his own hands. The company wanted it. Right in the path of their planned depot, they offered to buy us out for 1/10 what it was worth. When we said no, Cal shrugged. Funny how troublemakers have a habit of dying in fires. Lila was quiet for a moment. Then, you've been hunting his killers. 5 years now? Following cold trails and rumors? Found 2 of the men involved. They're in the ground where they belong. Cal's voice went flat. But the one who gave the order, who signed the papers, all I have is those initials. G.P. Lila stopped walking so suddenly that Cal nearly ran into her. Her face had gone pale beneath her freckles. What? He asked. Nothing. Just... She shook her head. We should hurry. Sister Mercy will need help with Mr. Santos. But Cal had spent too many years reading people to miss the recognition in her eyes. You know something. Not here, she said quietly. Tonight. Come to the cannery after closing. There are things I need to show you. The mission was chaos when they arrived. Sister Mercy had Santos laid out on a table, working to dig the bullet from his shoulder while his wife held his hand. The nun worked with practiced efficiency, her hands steady as any surgeon's. The Lord provides many teachers, she said without looking up. Mine happened to be a field hospital during the war. Mr. Bennett, if you could hold his shoulders, this next part won't be pleasant. Cal did as asked, using his weight to keep Santos still while Sister Mercy worked. The miner gritted his teeth, sweat pouring down his face, but didn't cry out. Tough men, these miners. They had to be... There, Sister Mercy said finally. dropping a bloody piece of lead into a basin. "Now we pray infection doesn't set in. Mrs. Santos, you'll need to keep the wound clean. I'll show you how." Toby arrived breathless, carrying a leather satchel that he handed to Lila. She opened it briefly, checking the contents, then passed it to Sister Mercy. "Medical supplies," she said simply, "from back when I had dreams of being useful in other ways." Sister Mercy accepted the bag without question. "We use the gifts God provides, regardless of their origin. Mr. Bennett." A word. She led him outside, where they could speak privately. Up close, Cal could see she was older than he'd first thought, with lines carved by sun and sorrow. "You've made an enemy today," she said. "Pike is vicious, but he's merely a symptom. The real disease runs deeper." "The railroad company. Among others, there are men coming. Mr. Bennett. Men with papers that say they own everything we've built here. They'll use the law when it suits them and violence when it doesn't." She fixed him with sharp blue eyes. "The question is, are you the kind of man who stands against such things?" "I'm the kind who keeps moving," Cal said. "Safer for everyone that way." "Perhaps, or perhaps you've been running so long you've forgotten what it feels like to stand still." She patted his arm with surprising gentleness. "Think on it. Mr. Bennett, God rarely sends us help by accident." Inside, Lila was talking quietly with Mrs. Santos while Toby fetched water. The boy moved carefully, favoring his bruised cheek, but there was something fierce in his eyes now. Cal recognized it the moment a child learned that justice was something you had to fight for, not something that came naturally to the world. "Miss Lila," Toby said suddenly, "I heard something else. When Pike was talking to that fancy man from the company last week." "What kind of something?" Lila asked. "They mentioned the dam, said something about clearing the squatters and making room for progress. The fancy man, he laughed and said floods were acts of God that no one could blame on the company." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Santos tried to sit up, his face gray with pain and fear. "The dam," he said. "They wouldn't. There's 300 people living in those camps below." "They would," Lila said grimly. "If it meant driving out the independent miners and claiming their stakes." She looked at Cal. "This is bigger than Pike shooting troublemakers. This is—" A commotion outside cut her off. Through the window, Cal saw a group of hard-looking men riding into town. They wore no badges, but their bearing screamed enforcers. The man leading them was tall and lean, with a kind of forgettable face that made him perfect for dirty work. "Horace Vale," Sister Mercy said quietly. "The company's special negotiator." "That what they're calling killers these days?" Cal muttered. Vale dismounted in front of the mission, his men spreading out to block the exits. He removed his hat politely when Sister Mercy opened the door. "Sister," he said in a voice smooth as oil. "I heard there was some trouble this morning. Came to make sure everyone's all right." "God's grace provides," Sister Mercy replied evenly. "We're managing." "Good, good." Vale's eyes swept the room, lingering on Cal before settling on Toby. "That's the boy, isn't it? The one spreading lies about Deputy Pike?" "I didn't tell no lies," Toby burst out, but Lila's hand on his shoulder silenced him. "Children say all sorts of things," Vale continued. "But we can't have rumors disrupting the peace. Bad for business. Bad for everyone." His smile was cold as winter wind. "I'll need to take the boy for questioning, just to clear things up." "Over my dead body," Cal said quietly. Vale's eyes flicked to him, assessing. "That can be arranged, Mr. Bennett." "Ah, the drifter Pike mentioned. You should have left this morning. Mr. Bennett would have been healthier." Cal smiled without humor. "I've never been much concerned with my health." "No. Well, perhaps you should think about the health of others." Vale's gaze swept meaningfully over the wounded Santos, his wife, Sister Mercy, Accidents happen so easily out here. Fires start, wells get poisoned, all sorts of tragedies. The threat hung in the air like smoke. Cal felt the familiar itch between his shoulder blades, the one that said violence was coming whether he wanted it or not. But before he could move, Lila stepped forward. Mr. Vale, she said pleasantly. How nice to see you again. I believe you left some paperwork at my establishment last time you visited. Something about mineral rights. I've kept it safe for you. Vale's expression shifted minutely. I don't recall any paperwork. No, how forgetful of me. Must be thinking of someone else. Lila's smile was sweet as honey and twice as dangerous. Toby, why don't you help Sister Mercy with the bandages, mister? Vale was just leaving. For a long moment, nobody moved. Cal counted heartbeats, measured distances, calculated angles of fire. Then Vale chuckled, a sound like breaking glass. Of course, wouldn't want to interfere with God's work. He tipped his hat again. We'll be in touch, Miss Hart. Soon. He left with his men, but the threat lingered like a bad smell. Sister Mercy closed the door firmly behind them, then leaned against it. Lord, grant us strength, she murmured. He'll be back, Cal said. Yes, Lila's face was grim. But not today. Today we bought time. With what currency? Cal asked. What paperwork does he think you have? The kind that could hang him. Lila said simply, if I could prove it, if anyone would listen. She shook her head. We need to get Toby somewhere safe. All of you. Actually, Santos, can you ride? The miner nodded weakly. If it means protecting my family. Good. Sister Mercy, is the old mine shaft still accessible, the one near your mission garden? It is. We use it for storage sometimes. Then that's where we'll go. Just until... No. Cal heard himself speak before he'd made the conscious decision. Running makes them bolder. Take the boy. Yes, keep him safe. But I'm done running. Lila studied him. This isn't your fight. Wasn't. Past tense. Cal touched the photograph in his pocket. My brother died because he wouldn't run. Because he believed standing up meant something. I've spent 5 years telling myself he was wrong. He looked at Toby, at the bruise darkening on the boy's cheek. Maybe it's time I found out if he was right. Something shifted in Lila's expression, surprise. Maybe, or hope. You're sure? No, Cal admitted. But I'm tired of being unsure about everything. She nodded slowly. Tonight, then. After closing, there are things you need to know. About Pike, about Vale, about... She hesitated. About your brother. The words hit Cal like cold water. You know something about Jacob? Tonight, she repeated. Keep your head down until then. And Mr. Bennett, whatever happens, remember I tried to warn you off. This was your choice. She gathered Toby and left with Sister Mercy to arrange hiding places. Cal stood in the empty mission, his hand on his gun, his mind racing. Through the window, he could see Vale's men taking positions around town. Casual as you please. The trap was closing, and he'd just volunteered to spring it. But for the first time in 5 years, that felt like the right decision. The morning sun climbed higher, baking the streets of Jericho Wells. Somewhere a church bell tolled, calling faithful souls to prayer. Cal Bennett, who hadn't prayed since the day he'd buried his brother, found himself whispering words he'd thought forgotten. All right, Jacob, he said quietly. I'm standing still. Now what? The only answer was the wind and the distant cry of a hawk circling on the thermals. But somehow, that seemed like enough. For now. The clouds built up over the mountains like a wall of black wool, and the old-timers in Jericho Wells shook their heads knowingly. Flash flood season had come early, and anyone with sense knew to stay clear of the arroyos when the sky looked like that. But Cal Bennett had Toby Malone hidden in a canvas-covered wagon, and staying put wasn't an option. This is foolish, Lila said for the 3rd time. checking the ropes that secured their supplies. That wash fills faster than a bathtub when the rain hits. Vale's men are watching all the main roads. Cal replied, adjusting his hat against the first fat drops of rain. Back trails are our only chance. They'd waited until dusk to move, using the confusion of shift change at the mines to slip out of town. Sister Mercy had provided the wagon and a map to Atsa's camp. The Navajo healer lived in the old ways, following the seasonal patterns in the canyons where even the railroad company feared to venture. At least let me come with you, Lila insisted. Someone needs to keep Vale thinking we're still here. Besides, Cal glanced at the boy huddled under blankets in the wagon bed. If this goes bad, I need you free to finish what we started. She pressed something into his hand, a leather pouch heavy with coins. For Atsa, he doesn't work for free, and he doesn't trust paper money. Their fingers touched briefly, and Cal felt that pull again, stronger than before. 5 years of keeping people at arm's length had left him unprepared for how much he wanted to stay close to this woman who faced down gunmen with coffee pots and secrets. Go, she said softly, before I decide to be foolish too. Cal clicked to the horses and the wagon lurched forward into the gathering darkness. Behind them, lights began winking on in Jericho wells like fallen stars. Ahead, the trail wound up into the Badlands where ancient peoples had carved homes from cliff faces and where modern men got lost chasing their own shadows. The rain held off for the first hour, just scattered drops that turned the dust to thin mud. Toby poked his head out from under the canvas. I could have stayed hidden on my own, the boy said. Didn't need to trouble you. No trouble, Cal said. Man should know who his enemies are, and you're the only witness to what really happened. Pike's gonna kill me if he catches me. Pike's going to try. There's a difference. The boy was quiet for a moment. Then, you ever kill anyone? Mr. Cal. Cal considered lying, but the boy had seen enough false comfort. Yes. Did they deserve it? I thought so at the time. Still think so most days. Cal guided the horses around a washout. But killing changes you, boy. Each time takes a piece of something you can't get back. Pike killed Mr. Santos, shot him down for asking questions. Santos is still alive, last I saw. But he tried to kill him. That's gotta count for something. Thunder rolled across the canyon like a barrel downstairs. Cal urged the horses faster. It counts, but justice and revenge aren't the same thing, much as they might look alike in the dark. The trail narrowed, forcing them to hug the canyon wall. On their left, the ground fell away into blackness. Cal could hear water down there, not much yet. Just the normal trickle of Skeleton Creek, but he'd seen these canyons fill in minutes when the sky opened up. My PA used to take this route, Toby said, before the sickness got him. Said there were old paintings on the rocks up here, from before even the Mexicans came. Your father was a smart man, knowing these trails. He was a drunk, Toby said matter-of-factly. But he knew the desert. Said it was the only honest thing left. It'd kill you clean if you were stupid. But it didn't lie about it first. The rain came then, not gradually, but all at once, like someone had overturned a bucket the size of the sky. Cal could barely see the horse's ears through the downpour. The trail turned to a river of mud, and the wagon wheels began to slip. Hold on, Cal shouted over the roar. The horses screamed and lurched sideways. For a heart-stopping moment, Cal felt the wagon tilt toward the drop. Then the wheels caught on something, a rock, a root, Providence, and they steadied. But the respite was brief. A new sound joined the rain's percussion, a rumbling that Cal felt in his bones before he heard it with his ears. Up canyon, where a dozen tributaries met, tons of water were gathering into a liquid avalanche. Flash flood, Toby yelled. Cal stood in the driver's box, searching desperately for higher ground. There, a sloped section of trail that switchbacked up the canyon wall. It would be treacherous in the mud, but it was their only chance. He whipped the horses, hating himself for it, but hating the thought of drowning more. The animals lunged forward, hooves scrambling for purchase. The wagon tilted crazily, throwing Cal against the side rails behind them. The rumbling grew to a roar. They made the first switchback just as the flood hit the main trail. Cal caught a glimpse of it in a lightning flash, a wall of brown water carrying full trees like twigs, boulders bouncing in its grip like a giant's dice. "Go, go, go!" he urged the horses. The second switchback was steeper. The horses' hooves slipped, caught, slipped again. The wagon wheels spun freely for terrifying seconds before finding grip. Toby had gone silent in the back, probably praying or too scared to make noise. They were halfway to the third switchback when the horses gave out. The lead mare went to her knees, sides heaving. The wheeler tried to keep pulling but couldn't budge the weight alone. Cal jumped down, sinking immediately to his ankles in mud. "Out, boy, we go on foot." Toby scrambled from the wagon, clutching the satchel of food and medical supplies Sister Mercy had packed. Cal grabbed his rifle and Lila's money pouch, then cut the horses free. Better they have a chance than die in the traces. Man and boy struggled upward, using rocks and scraggly bushes for handholds. The flood roared below them, its spray reaching high enough to soak them worse than the rain already had. Cal pushed Toby ahead, ready to catch him if he slipped. Lightning split the sky, illuminating the canyon in stark relief. In that snapshot of brilliance, Cal saw a sight that made his heart lift, firelight flickering from a cave mouth above them, and the silhouette of a man standing at its entrance. "Up here," the man called. "Quickly!" They climbed the last 50 feet on willpower alone. Cal's hands were raw, his clothes weighing him down like lead blankets. When they finally reached the cave, strong hands pulled them inside. The cave was deeper than it appeared, opening into a natural chamber where a smokeless fire cast dancing shadows on the walls covered with ancient paintings, stick figures hunting, dancing, reaching toward stars. A man sat by the fire, his face weathered like old leather, long gray hair bound with a strip of red cloth. "Atza!" Cal gasped. The healer nodded. "Lila Hart sent word you might come, though she didn't mention you'd bring half the mountain's water with you." Despite the dry words, his dark eyes showed concern. "The boy is hurt." Cal looked at Toby, really looked for the first time since they'd fled the flood. The boy's cheek was purple where Pike had struck him, but worse was the way he held his left arm against his chest. "Happened in the wagon," Toby said through chattering teeth. "When we tilted, didn't want to slow us down." Atza moved with surprising grace for a man his age, gentle fingers probing the injury. "Dislocated," he pronounced. "Painful but fixable. This will hurt," he told Toby, "but only for a moment." The boy nodded, biting his lip. Atza gripped the arm, made a swift motion, and Toby's shoulder popped back into place with an audible click. The boy cried out once, then sagged with relief. "Better?" Atza asked. "Yes, sir. Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. That flood won't recede until dawn, and Pike's men will be watching for you once it does." Atza moved to a collection of pottery jars, selecting dried herbs with practiced ease. "We have time. Time to heal. Time to talk. Time to plan." He set water to boiling in a blackened pot, adding herbs that filled the cave with a sharp, clean scent. "Strip those wet clothes before the cold settles in your bones. There are blankets in that basket." While Cal and Toby changed into dry blankets, Atza prepared his medicine. The firelight caught the silver in his hair, the deep lines around his eyes. This was a man who'd seen the world change and found ways to adapt without losing himself. "Lila trusts you," Cal said. "And I trust her." Atza handed them each a cup of the herbal tea. It tasted of sage and something bitter but warming. "She helped my grandson when the company men accused him of stealing horses. Proved they'd altered their own bills of sale. She seems to make a habit of helping people. It's her nature, also her burden." Atza settled back against the cave wall. "You're hunting the men who killed your brother." It wasn't a question. Cal nodded anyway. And you think Pike knows something? The initials match. The timing fits. But you need proof. Atsa sipped his own tea thoughtfully. The desert has many secrets. Cal Bennett, some are buried in the sand, others are carried on the wind, and some are written in ledgers and locked in safes. Toby had fallen asleep despite himself, exhausted by terror and pain. Cal tucked the blanket higher around the boy's shoulders. He reminds you of your brother, Atsa observed. Jacob was older, stronger, but yeah, something about the way he stands up despite the odds. The young often see justice more clearly than their elders. They haven't learned to compromise yet. Atsa added more wood to the fire. Tell me about this brother of yours. So Cal did. He talked about growing up in Kansas, about their father teaching them to read the weather and respect the land, about their mother's death when Cal was 12 and how Jacob had stepped up, becoming both brother and parent, about the farm that had been their whole world until the railroad decided it stood in the way of progress. Jacob believed in the law, Cal said. Even when the sheriff came with eviction papers, he said we'd fight it in court, said America was built on laws, not guns. He stared into the fire. They burned him alive in our barn, made it look like an accident, knocked over lantern, doors barred from outside by a fallen beam. You saw this. I was in town, filing those same court papers Jacob believed in, came back to smoke and ashes and neighbors too scared to say what they'd seen. Cal's hands tightened on the tin cup. Took me months to piece together what happened, years to track down the men responsible. Yet you're here, not pursuing them. Trail went cold in Denver. Then I heard about troubles down here, railroad companies, burning barns, silenced witnesses. Seemed like Pike's kind of game. Atsa was quiet for a long moment. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the canyon. The flood would be scouring everything clean, erasing trails, changing the landscape. Come morning, the desert would look different, renewed and dangerous in new ways. There's something you should know, Atsa said finally. About Lila Hart. Cal looked up sharply. What about her? She carries her own ghosts. Her husband died 3 years ago, officially a riding accident. But Tom Hart had been gathering evidence about the railroad's land grabs, documenting their bribes and threats. His horse came back without him. They found his body at the bottom of Devil's Canyon. Pike. Before Pike's time, but the same hands that sign his pay. Atsa refilled their cups. She could have sold the canary, left for somewhere safe. Instead, she stayed, gathering her own evidence, protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. She's been waiting for someone like you. I'm no hero. No, you're a weapon looking for a target. She hopes to aim you true. The blunt assessment stung because it was accurate. Cal had become an instrument of vengeance, honed by loss and sharpened by rage. But sitting in this ancient cave, watching a boy sleep safe despite the storm, he wondered if he could be something more. The company fears her, Atsa continued. She knows too much, has helped too many, but killing her outright would raise questions they can't afford. So they squeeze, hoping she'll break or run. She doesn't seem the running type. No, Atsa smiled. Neither do you, despite your protestations. He reached into a leather bag and withdrew a small object wrapped in faded cloth. This was given to me by my grandfather, who had it from his. It's said to clarify the mind and steady the heart in times of choosing. He unwrapped a piece of turquoise carved into the shape of a bear, no bigger than a child's thumb but perfect in every detail. The firelight woke blue depths in the stone. I can't take this, Cal said. You're not taking. I'm giving. There's a difference. Atsa pressed it into Cal's hand. Tomorrow you'll face choices. Pike and Vale won't give up easily. The boys' testimony threatens everything they've built. They'll come with violence and law twisted to serve their purposes. Then we'll meet them the same way. Will you, or will you meet them with something they don't expect, truth backed by courage? Community instead of isolation. Atsa's eyes reflected the ancient paintings on the walls. My people have survived by knowing when to fight and when to endure, when to stand alone and when to stand together. You've been alone long enough. Cal Bennett. The storm began to ease as the night wore on. The roar of the flood diminished to a rumble, then a whisper. Cal dozed fitfully, waking each time to check on Toby and scan the cave entrance for threats. As dawn approached, Atsa woke them with more tea and strips of dried meat. Toby's shoulder was stiff but functional. The bruise on his face spectacular but not dangerous. The trail will be washed out, Atsa said. But I know another way, older and harder but passable. It will bring you to the backside of Sister Mercy's mission by noon. You're not coming? Cal asked. My place is here, but this is not goodbye. He helped them gather their few remaining supplies. When the time comes for justice, send word. The desert has many friends who remember kindness and repay debts. They left as the sun painted the canyon walls gold and red. The flood had indeed transformed the landscape, leaving new channels carved in earth and rock. The wagon was gone, presumably swept away with half the mountainside. But they were alive, and Toby could testify to what he'd seen. The journey back was hard but uneventful. Atsa's trail wound through slots in the rock where they had to turn sideways to pass, over ridges where the whole valley spread below them like a map. They saw no one, though Cal spotted dust clouds that might have been search parties. When the mission finally came into view, Cal felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. They'd survived the night, but the real test was coming. Pike and Vale wouldn't stop until Toby was silenced and anyone who helped him was punished. Mr. Cal, Toby said as they approached the back gate. What Atsa said about standing together, you think folks in town would really do that? I don't know, Cal answered honestly. But I think it's time we found out. They slipped through the gate to find Sister Mercy waiting, her face drawn with worry. Thank the Lord, she breathed. We thought when the flood came. We're all right, Cal assured her. Where's Lila? At the Canary. Vale's men have been watching it all night, but they haven't moved against her. Not yet. Sister Mercy ushered them inside. She said to tell you she'll be ready when you are. Whatever that means. Cal touched the turquoise bear in his pocket, feeling its smooth surface warm from his body heat. He thought about choices and consequences, about his brother who'd believed in law and Lila who believed in justice, about a boy who'd stood up to power because it was right. It means, he said quietly, that it's time to stop running. Sister Mercy smiled, and in that moment she looked less like a nun and more like an avenging angel. Good. I'll ring the bell for morning service. Amazing how many people feel the need to pray when there's trouble in town. As the mission bell began to toll, Cal realized the sound would carry across Jericho Wells, a summons and a warning combined. People would come, and they would have to choose stand with Pike and Vale and the comfortable lie of order, or stand with a drifter, a saloon keeper, and a boy who dared to tell the truth. The sun climbed higher, burning off the last of the storm clouds. It was going to be a beautiful day in the desert, a terrible day for secrets, a perfect day for justice, if they could seize it. Cal checked his rifle and prepared to find out which way the town would fall. The back room of the Canary had become a war council disguised as a reading circle. Lila had spread the word carefully, just a few women gathering to practice their letters. Nothing that should concern the men who ran things. But when Cal slipped in through the kitchen entrance after dark, he found a dozen people packed into the space, their faces grim with purpose. Samira Velasquez stood guard by the window, her blacksmith's hammer resting casually against her leg. Sister Mercy sat with a pot of coffee and a stack of papers. Mrs. Santos was there, her husband's arm still in a sling but his eyes sharp with anger. Even old Martha Collins had come, the woman who ran the boarding house and heard everything that happened in Jericho Wells. We don't have much time, Lila said, gesturing Cal to a chair. Vale's been asking questions about where you took the boy. Pike's offering a reward for information. How much? Cal asked. $50. Toby piped up from his corner, where he'd been hidden behind a false panel. I'm almost insulted it ain't more. This isn't a joke, boy, Santos said sharply. They find you. We'll all hang. No one's hanging, Lila said firmly. She moved to an old secretary desk and withdrew a leather-bound ledger. Not if we move first. She opened the ledger, revealing pages of careful notation in her precise hand. Names, dates, transactions, all documented with a bookkeeper's attention to detail. 3 years I've been collecting this, she said. Every bribe Pike took, every forged document Vale filed, every accident that happened to someone who wouldn't sell their land. She turned to a marked page. Including your brother, Cal. Cal's breath caught. There it was in black and white. A payment record dated 2 weeks after Jacob's death. Services rendered. Kansas matter, $500 to Jeep Pike. Authorized H. Vale. His hands shook as he traced the words. $500. That's what his brother's life had been worth to them. I'm sorry, Lila said softly. I found this 6 months ago, but had no way to track you down. When you showed up here, she shrugged. Seemed like Providence. Or a trap, Samira suggested. Could be they knew he'd come eventually. Pike's been jumpy lately, like he's expecting trouble. Cal forced himself to think past the rage. This ledger, where did it come from? My late husband started it, Lila said. He was methodical about documentation. After he died, I found his hidden records. I've added to them since, gathering evidence from people Pike and Vale heard. It's enough to hang them, Sister Mercy said, if we could get it to an honest judge. That's the problem. Santos spoke up. Judge Harrington is in Vale's pocket. Sheriff's too scared to act. And the federal marshals are 3 days' ride away. Then we make our own court, Cal said. Right here in Jericho Wells. Everyone looked at him like he'd suggested they fly to the moon. Hear me out, he continued. Vale and Pike rule through fear and official-looking papers. But what happens when the whole town sees proof they're criminals, when every miner, merchant, and mother knows the truth? They'll silence us, Martha said bluntly. Burn us out like they done to others. Not if we're all together. Not if we make it public enough that killing us would bring the kind of attention even the railroad can't afford. Lila leaned forward. What are you proposing? A town meeting, tomorrow, Sunday, right after church when everyone's gathered anyway. We present the evidence. Let Toby testify. Show them all what kind of men they've been bowing to. And when Pike comes with his guns, Samira asked. Then we defend ourselves, together. The room fell silent. Cal could see the fear in their faces, but also something else, a hunger for justice that had been starved too long. I'll need to study that ledger, he said to Lila. Every detail about my brother's death. Of course, she hesitated, then added. But Cal, there's more. Things that might be difficult to hear. He steeled himself. Tell me. Your brother wasn't random. Vale's been running this same scheme for years, moving from territory to territory. They identify valuable land, manufacture reasons to seize it, then eliminate anyone who resists. She turned pages in the ledger. But Jacob, he fought back differently. He'd been corresponding with a federal prosecutor in Chicago, sending evidence about the railroad's practices. Cal's chest tightened. He never told me. He was protecting you. The letters are here. I found them in Tom's papers. They were working together, your brother and my husband, building a case that could have brought down the whole corrupt system. She handed him a bundle of letters tied with string. Jacob's handwriting made Cal's eyes burn. His methodical big brother, still trying to save the world through proper channels. That's why they had to die, Cal said, understanding flooding through him. Not just for the land, for what they knew. Yes, Lila's voice was gentle, and now we know it too. The meeting continued past midnight, plans taking shape. Sister Mercy would spread word through her congregation. Samira would rally the Mexican workers who'd suffered under Vale's schemes. Santos would reach out to the miners. They'd turn the Canary's main room into a courtroom, present their evidence to the whole town, force a reckoning. As people slipped away into the night, Lila caught Cal's arm. "Stay a moment." When they were alone, except for Toby sleeping in his hidden nook, she led Cal to the main saloon. The room was dark except for moonlight through the windows, the bottles behind the bar gleaming like promises. "I need to show you something else," she said, kneeling behind the bar. She pried up a loose floorboard, revealing a cache that made Cal whistle low. 2 rifles, boxes of ammunition, and enough dynamite to blow the Canary to splinters. "Insurance," she said. "Tom taught me that hope for the best means nothing without preparing for the worst." "You've been planning this for a while." "Planning, waiting, praying for someone like you to come along." She replaced the board carefully. "I could gather all the evidence in the world, but I needed someone who could make people listen, someone who understood the cost of standing up to men like Vale." Cal thought about all the towns he'd passed through, all the injustices he'd ignored because they weren't his problem. "I haven't been that man, not for a long time." "But you could be." She stood, dusting off her skirts. "That's what I saw in you that first night. Not just another drifter, but someone running from who he used to be. And if I'm running for good reason, if the man I used to be got his brother killed, then maybe it's time to stop running and start fighting. Not for vengeance, but for justice. There's a difference." They stood close in the darkness, and Cal could smell that lavender soap again, could see the determination in her eyes that had kept her here when anyone sensible would have fled. "Why didn't you leave?" he asked. "After your husband died. Why stay? Because this is my home. Because these are my people. Because if I ran, Tom would have died for nothing." She touched the small keypin on her collar. "And because I made a promise at his graveside that I'd see this through." Cal understood promises made to the dead. They were chains that could drag you down or anchors that kept you steady, depending on how you wore them. A sound outside made them both freeze. Footsteps on the boardwalk, deliberate and heavy. Cal drew his pistol as the door opened, but it was only Atsa, materializing from the shadows like smoke. "Trouble," the healer said without preamble. "Fire at the Santos place. Vale's men, making a point." They ran through the empty streets, Lila hiking up her skirts to keep pace. The small adobe house the Santos family rented was fully engulfed, flames licking at the sky. Neighbors had formed a bucket brigade, but it was clearly hopeless. "Mrs." Santos stood in the street, clutching her 2 young children, tears streaming down her face. Her husband struggled against 2 men holding him back from the inferno. "Our papers," he kept saying, "everything we owned." Cal spotted Vale across the street, watching the destruction with satisfaction. Pike stood beside him, star gleaming in the firelight. "Shame about the fire," Vale called out. "These old buildings, so dangerous. A knocked-over lamp, a moment's carelessness." He shrugged eloquently. "You bastard," Santos snarled. "You burned us out because I wouldn't keep quiet." "Careful with such accusations," Pike warned. "Slander's a serious offense. Wouldn't want to add legal troubles to your current misfortunes." Cal started forward, but Lila caught his arm. "Not here," she whispered. "Not like this. It's what they want." She was right. Vale was goading them, trying to provoke a response that would justify a massacre. But knowing that didn't make watching any easier. "The mission will take you in," Sister Mercy told the Santos family. "Come, let's get the children away from the smoke." As the crowd dispersed, Cal noticed Toby slip from the shadows. The boy had disobeyed orders to stay hidden, drawn by the flames like all young boys were. But there was something in his expression, not excitement, but recognition. "I seen this before," Toby said quietly to Cal. The night my folks died. Same smell, same color flames, like they used something special to make sure nothing survives. Cal filed that information away. Evidence was piling up. But would it be enough? Would the town find courage when faced with this kind of ruthless power? The answer came sooner than expected. As they walked back to the Canary, they found a crowd gathering. Word of the fire had spread, and something had shifted in the air. Cal saw it in the set of shoulders, the lift of chins, the way hands rested on tool handles that could become weapons if needed. Tomorrow, Samira was saying to a group of workers, after church. Time we heard some truth in this town. The crowd grew as more people emerged from their homes. Martha Collins stood on her boarding house porch, nightgown covered by a shawl, gray hair in curling papers, but her voice rang with authority. Santos family's staying with me tonight, she announced, and anybody else Vale thinks to burn out. I've got rooms and a scattergun, and I know how to use both. It was like watching a dam crack. One voice of defiance became 2, became 10, became too many to count. The fear that had held Jericho Wells silent was breaking apart, replaced by something more dangerous to men like Vale solidarity. Cal found himself at the center of it. People looking to him for direction he wasn't sure he could provide. But Lila stepped smoothly into the gap. The Canary will be open early tomorrow, she said. Coffee and courage, no charge for either. We've got things to discuss, all of us together. The crowd dispersed slowly, reluctantly, like they were afraid the moment would shatter if they let it go. Cal watched them go. Ordinary people who'd found something extraordinary in themselves. It's starting, Atsa said beside him. The healing, it always begins with fire burning away the old so the new can grow. They'll come at us hard now, Cal warned. Yes, the healer smiled. But look around you. We are no longer alone, as if to underscore his words. The mission bell began to toll, not the regular call to prayer, but an older pattern. One that hadn't been used since Apache raids threatened the territory. It was a call to arms, a summons to defend the community. Lights appeared in windows throughout Jericho Wells. Men emerged with rifles, women with lanterns, children peering around their parents' legs. The town was waking up, shaking off the stupor of fear. Pike and Vale had badly miscalculated. The fire meant to terrorize had instead ignited something else the fury of people pushed too far. Inside, Lila urged, we need to prepare for tomorrow. But Cal lingered in the street, watching the Santos house collapse into embers. He thought about Jacob, about Tom Hart, about all the ones who'd stood up and been struck down. Tomorrow would bring a reckoning one way or another. He touched the turquoise bear in his pocket, feeling its solid weight. Atsa had spoken of knowing when to fight and when to endure. The time for endurance had passed. The mission bell continued to toll as Cal walked into the Canary. Through the windows, he could see people throughout the town cleaning guns, sharpening tools, preparing for what morning would bring. Jericho Wells had found its courage. Now they'd find out if courage was enough. The Canary was quiet now. The crowd's gone home to prepare for tomorrow's confrontation. Cal stood in Lila's private office, watching her lock away the ledger that contained so much pain and truth. The lamp cast shadows that danced on the walls, and through the window, he could see Vale's men patrolling the streets like wolves circling their prey. You should leave, Lila said without turning around. Take Toby and ride out tonight. I can handle whatever comes. No. The simple word hung between them. Lila finally faced him, and he saw the exhaustion she'd been hiding all day. The weight of 3 years' worth of careful planning coming to a head. This was my fight long before it was yours, she said. My husband's death, my town, my choice to stay. You don't owe us anything. That's where you're wrong. Cal moved closer, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her sage honey eyes. This stopped being just your fight the moment Pike put his hands on that boy, the moment I saw Jacob's name in that ledger, the moment. He stopped, uncertain how to voice what had been building between them since that first night. The moment what? She asked softly. The moment I realized I'd found something worth staying for. The air between them crackled with unspoken possibilities. Lila reached up, her fingers barely brushing the scar on his jaw, an old wound from an old fight he'd almost forgotten. You don't even know me, she whispered. Not really. The woman I've had to become, the things I've done to gather this evidence. Then tell me. She turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. Tom wasn't just collecting information about the railroad's crimes. We were working with the Pinkertons. Not the ones who break strikes, the ones who investigate corporate corruption. It was dangerous, delicate work. Cal remembered the skill with which she'd handled Pike, the way she moved through her saloon gathering intelligence. It made sense now. After Tom died, they wanted me to leave, said I was compromised, but I couldn't, not with his killers walking free. Her voice grew harder. So I used what he'd taught me, played the grieving widow running a saloon, harmless and decorative. Men talk when they drink, especially when they think you're just furniture. The locked room, Cal said, understanding. Where you really work? She nodded. Every piece of information carefully documented, cross-referenced, verified. 3 years of being someone I'm not, smiling at men who destroyed everything I loved, pouring drinks for killers. You're the strongest person I've ever met. Or the most foolish. She laughed, but it was edged with tears. Tomorrow it all comes apart. Everything I've built, every mask I've worn. And then what, even if we win? Even if Vale and Pike face justice? Who am I without the mission that's consumed me? Cal crossed to her in 2 strides, turning her to face him. You're Lila Hart. You run the finest establishment in Jericho Wells. You stand up for those who can't stand for themselves. You're the woman who threw coffee on a deputy's boots and made it look like an accident. His hands framed her face gently. You're the woman who made a drifter want to stay. Cal! Her voice broke on his name. I've been running for 5 years, he said. From Jacob's death, from my failure to protect him, from the man I couldn't be. But you made me remember who I was before the anger, before the hunt. You made me want to be that man again. She searched his eyes, and whatever she found there seemed to decide her. Rising on her toes, she pressed her lips to his, a kiss that tasted of desperation and hope in equal measure. Cal pulled her closer, feeling the tremor that ran through her, matching it with his own. When they broke apart, both breathing unsteadily, Lila took his hand and led him through the saloon to a door he'd never seen her use. The storeroom beyond was small, filled with crates and barrels, but clean and private. She turned the key in the lock with steady hands, then faced him. Not since Tom, she said quietly. I need you to know that this isn't something I do lightly. Nothing about you is light, Cal said. Everything you do with your whole heart. It's what He caught himself, not ready for that word yet. It's what drew me to you. She smiled then, really smiled, and it transformed her face. Always so careful with words, but tonight, I don't want careful. She reached for the pins in her hair, letting the dark waves tumble free. The lamplight caught the threads of auburn hidden in the brown, turned her skin to warm cream. Cal watched, mesmerized, as she became not the saloon keeper or the secret agent or the grieving widow, but simply Lila. Stay, she said, and the word carried weight beyond the moment. It was invitation and challenge and plea all at once. He went to her, no longer the drifter who never stayed long, but a man who'd finally found his reason to stop running. Her hands were steady as she unbuttoned his shirt, revealing scars from too many fights, too many close calls. She traced them gently, learning the map of his survival. So many battles, she murmured. All led me here, he replied, catching her hand and pressing it to his heart. To you, to this moment. What followed was gentle and fierce by turns. 2 wounded souls finding solace in each other. The narrow cot creaked under their combined weight, and Lila laughed a sound of pure joy that Cal wanted to capture and keep forever. He kissed that laughter, tasted the salt of her tears when emotion overwhelmed her, held her as she trembled against him. In the aftermath, they lay entwined, her head on his chest, his fingers combing through her hair. The lamp had burned low, casting everything in soft gold. Through the thin walls, they could hear the town settling for what might be its last peaceful night. "Tell me about after," Lila said. "When this is over, when Vale and Pike are gone, what then?" Cal considered. For so long, his only thought had been the next lead, the next town, the next possibility of vengeance. But now, "Maybe I'll stick around," he said. "Help rebuild what they've broken. Teach Toby to handle a horse proper. Court a certain saloon keeper, if she'll have me." "Court," she lifted her head, eyes dancing. "Seems we might be past the courting stage." "A man should do things proper," Cal said seriously, then grinned when she swatted his chest. "Besides, you deserve to be courted. Flowers and Sunday dinners and all of it." "I don't need flowers," she said, settling back against him. "Just this someone who sees me, all of me, not just the roles I play." "I see you," he promised, "and what I see is worth everything." They lay in comfortable silence, listening to each other breathe. Then Lila spoke again, her voice carefully neutral. "There's something else in that ledger, about your brother." Cal's body tensed. "What?" He knew they were coming. The night he died, there's a telegram receipt, sent to you in town. He was trying to warn you to stay away." The words hit like physical blows. Jacob had known, had tried to protect him one last time, even facing death. "The telegram never reached me," Cal said hollowly. "Pike must have intercepted it." "Yes," Lila's arms tightened around him. "I'm sorry. I debated telling you, but—" "No secrets," Cal said. "Not between us, never between us." She kissed him then, soft and sweet, a promise sealed without words. When she pulled back, her expression had shifted to something playful. "You know what I just realized?" she said. "You're still planning to leave in the morning, just like you said that first night." "What?" She gestured at the locked door, the private room, their tangled bodies. "The drifter never stayed long," she quoted, "until she locked the door and said—" Her voice dropped to a whisper, lips brushing his ear. "Obey me tonight." Cal laughed, really laughed for the first time in 5 years. "Is that an order, Miss Hart?" "It is." She straddled him, hair falling like a curtain around them. "Tonight you're mine. No past, no future, no ghosts or vengeance. Just us, just this." "Yes, ma'am," he said, reaching up to pull her down for another kiss. "Your wish is my command." She smiled against his lips. "Good. Then I wish for you to make me forget everything but your name. Think you can manage that drifter?" "Let me show you what this drifter can do when he's properly motivated." Cal growled, rolling them over. Her laughter filled the small room, bright and alive and perfect. They lost themselves in each other again, slower this time, learning the language of touch and breath and whispered endearments. The world outside ceased to exist. No veil, no Pike, no danger lurking. Just two hearts finding their way to each other in the darkness. Much later, as dawn approached, they dressed reluctantly. The real world was calling, bringing with it all the dangers they'd temporarily escaped. But something fundamental had changed. They were no longer two people fighting alone, but a united force, bound by more than just common cause. "Whatever happens today," Lila said, pinning her hair back up with practiced movements, "I want you to know this meant everything to me. You mean everything to me." Cal buckled on his gun belt, then crossed to her, tilting her chin up. "We're going to win today, And then we're going to build something good here. Together. Such confidence. But she smiled as she said it. What happened to the man who never stayed anywhere? He met a woman worth staying for. Cal kissed her once more, then squared his shoulders. Now let's go show Vale and Pike what happens when they threaten our town. Our town? Lila repeated, testing the words. I like the sound of that. They left the storeroom together, emerging into a cannery that was already filling with people despite the early hour. Word had spread today was the day of reckoning. Samira had arrived with a contingent of workers. Sister Mercy brought her congregation. Even Atsa was there, standing quietly in a corner, his presence a reminder that justice took many forms. You two look, Toby started to say, then blushed red. I mean, morning, Miss Lila. Mr. Cal. Lila ruffled his hair affectionately. Morning, Toby. Ready to tell your truth? The boy straightened. Yes, ma'am. Been practicing what to say all night. Cal surveyed the room, ordinary people preparing for an extraordinary stand. Through the windows, he could see Vale's men gathering too, sensing the shift in the air. The storm was about to break. But for the first time in 5 years, Cal wasn't facing it alone. He had Lila beside him, her hand briefly touching his in silent support. He had a town full of people ready to fight for their home. He had a reason to see tomorrow. All right, everyone, he called out. Let's go over the plan one more time. When that church bell rings, the crowd leaned in, eager and afraid and determined. Cal began to speak, laying out their strategy, but part of his mind remained in that locked room. In those precious hours when the world had shrunk to just 2 hearts beating as one. The drifter had finally found his home. Now he just had to fight to keep it. The church bells had barely finished ringing when the first explosion shook Jericho Wells. Cal threw himself over Lila as the windows of the cannery shattered inward, raining glass across the assembled townspeople. Through the chaos of screams and dust, he heard Vale's voice magnified by a speaking trumpet. Citizens of Jericho Wells, we have evidence of seditious conspiracy in that establishment. Come out peacefully or face the consequences. The dam, Toby gasped, his young face pale. They're gonna blow the dam. Cal helped Lila to her feet, brushing glass from her hair. How do you know? Heard them talking last week. They got dynamite up there, enough to flood the whole valley. Make it look like an accident. Blame it on faulty construction. 300 people in those camps, Santos said, horror dawning on his face. My cousins, their children. Cal's mind raced. They'd prepared for a confrontation, but not wholesale slaughter disguised as natural disaster. He looked at Lila, saw the same terrible understanding in her eyes. We split up, she said quickly. Half to the dam, half stay here to hold them off. It's what they want, Samira protested. Divide us, pick us off separately. Then we give them something they don't expect. Cal turned to the crowd. Who knows the old mining tunnels? Several hands rose, including Atsa's. The healer stepped forward. The Bitter Creek Tunnel runs within 50 feet of the dam's base, flooded years ago, but the upper passages are still clear. Can we reach the dam through them? If you don't mind tight spaces and 100-foot drops, yes. Another explosion, closer this time, through the broken windows. Cal could see Pike's men setting up positions along Main Street, but Vale himself was missing, already headed to the dam, no doubt. Samira, take 10 people through the tunnels. Cal ordered. Stop whatever's happening at the dam. Atsa, guide them. He turned to Sister Mercy. Can your mission hold wounded? The Lord's house stands ready, she replied firmly. Good. Santos, get the families there now. Anyone who can't fight. Cal checked his rifle, mind calculating odds. The rest of us make enough noise here to keep Pike thinking we're all still inside. And then, Lila asked. Then we prove that courage beats cruelty. People scattered to their tasks with remarkable discipline. Cal watched them go with mixed pride and fear. These weren't soldiers, they were miners and merchants, mothers and craftsmen. But they were fighting for their homes, and that made them formidable. "Cal!" Lila caught his arm as Samira's group slipped out the back. "If something happens—" "Nothing's happening to you," he said fiercely. "Not on my watch." She smiled sadly. "We can't both be trying to protect each other. This only works if we trust each other to handle our parts." She was right, though it killed him to admit it. "What's your part?" "I'm going to do what I do best." She moved to her hidden cache, pulling out a leather satchel. "Gather evidence. Vale will have written orders, official papers making this legal. Without them, he's just another killer." "Lila, no, it's too dangerous." "And charging armed men isn't—" She touched his face gently. "Trust me, I didn't survive 3 years of this by being reckless." Before he could protest further, she was gone, slipping through the chaos like smoke. Cal cursed under his breath but turned to the immediate threat. Pike's men were advancing, using overturned wagons as cover. "Windows!" he shouted. "Don't give them easy targets." The defenders spread out, taking positions. Martha Collins proved surprisingly handy with her scattergun, forcing Pike's men to keep their heads down. Young Toby darted between positions, carrying ammunition and messages, brave despite the fear in his eyes. The first rush came from the north 5 men trying to breach the side entrance. Cal dropped 2 before they reached the door, and the others retreated to cover, but it was just a probe. The real attack would come soon. "Mr. Cal." Toby scrambled over, dusty and breathless. "Sister Mercy says there's smoke from the east. Looks like they set fire to the grain warehouse." Another distraction, another crisis to split their attention. Cal wondered how long they could hold before something broke. The answer came sooner than expected. A tremendous roar echoed from the canyon, followed by the ground-shaking rumble of moving water. But it wasn't the catastrophic flood of a broken dam, something else. Something controlled. "They opened the spillways," someone shouted. "The emergency spillways." Cal's heart lifted. Samira's group had made it. Whatever Vale's plan had been, it was disrupted now. But the fight was far from over. Pike himself appeared in the street, no longer content to let others lead. "Bennett," he called. "Let's end this like men. You and me, winner walks away." "Don't," Santos warned. "It's a trap." Of course it was. But Cal also knew that Pike's challenge, made publicly, carried weight. This was still the frontier, where certain codes held power. "Terms," Cal called back. "Simple. I kill you. Your people disperse. You kill me." Pike smiled coldly. "Well, you won't, so it doesn't matter." Cal checked his Colt, then unbuckled his gun belt and handed it to Santos. "If something goes wrong, we'll handle it. The miner promised." Cal stepped into the street. Pike waited, hand hovering over his pistol. They'd do this proper face-to-face. Speed against speed. Will against will. Around them, both sides watched, fingers on triggers, waiting. "Funny thing," Pike said conversationally as they took positions. "Your brother said something similar, right before I put a torch to that barn." Red hazed Cal's vision. His hand twitched toward his gun, but Pike was already moving, already drawing. Cal threw himself sideways, Pike's bullet whining past his ear. His own shot took Pike in the shoulder, spinning him around but not dropping him. Pike fired again, wild. Cal felt the burn across his ribs but stayed focused. His second shot was better placed. Pike's gun flew from nerveless fingers as the bullet shattered his wrist. "Go ahead," Pike snarled, clutching his bloody arm. "Finish it. Show them you're just another killer." Cal stood over the fallen man, gun steady. Everything in him screamed for vengeance for Jacob, for all the innocents Pike had hurt. His finger tightened on the trigger. "Cal, no." Lila's voice cut through the rage. She stood at the corner of the Canary, and she wasn't alone. Behind her marched a column of blue uniforms federal marshals, badges gleaming in the sun. "Stand down, all of you." The lead marshal, a grizzled man with sergeant stripes, surveyed the scene with experienced eyes. "This town is now under federal jurisdiction pending investigation of railroad company malfeasance." Pike tried to crawl away, but didn't get far before marshals restrained him. Around the street, his hired guns threw down their weapons, suddenly aware they were outnumbered and outranked. "How?" Cal asked as Lila reached him. "Telegraph," she said simply. "I've been in contact with the Chicago prosecutor your brother was working with when Vail made his move today. I sent word. They've been riding hard from Fort Davis. The evidence? Safe, including new documents I found in Vail's hotel room." Her smile was sharp as a blade. "Seems he kept very detailed records of his crimes. Pride goeth before the fall." The aftermath was swift. Samira's group emerged from the tunnels, dusty but triumphant. They'd not only stopped the dam explosion, but captured Vail and 2 demolition experts in the act. The federal marshals took custody of all prisoners, promising swift trials. As the sun reached its zenith, Cal found himself sitting on the Canary's front steps, letting Lila tend the graze across his ribs. The street was full of celebrating townspeople, but he felt oddly detached from it all. "You could have killed him," Lila said quietly, wrapping the bandage. "Pike, no one would have blamed you." "I wanted to," Cal admitted. "God, how I wanted to! But then I heard your voice and remembered I'm not that man anymore. I'm the man who stays, who builds instead of destroys." "My man," she said softly, and the possession in those 2 words made his heart skip. Toby bounded up, grinning despite a spectacular black eye. "We did it. We really did it, Miss Lila. Does this mean I can testify proper now? In a real court?" "It does," she confirmed. "Though somehow I doubt they'll need much more evidence than what we've provided." The boy scampered off to share the news. Cal watched him go, then turned to Lila. "What now? Your mission's complete. The men who killed your husband will hang. You could go anywhere, do anything." She pretended to consider. "Well, the Canary needs new windows, and someone recently promised to court me properly. Sunday dinners were mentioned." "Were they now?" "They were, though." She leaned closer, voice dropping to a whisper. "I might be willing to skip ahead to certain parts, if properly motivated." Cal laughed, pulling her close despite the protests from his ribs. "Woman, you'll be the death of me." "No," she said seriously. "I'll be the life of you, just as you're the life of me. We've both been among the walking dead too long. Cal Bennett, time to start living." Marshal Briggs approached, tipping his hat. "Ma'am, sir. Wanted to thank you both. That prosecutor in Chicago, Hayes, speaks highly of your work. Said to tell you the government owes you a debt." "No debt," Lila said firmly. "Justice is its own reward. Still, if you ever need anything." Briggs handed her a card. "The service could use people like you. Both of you." After he left, Cal raised an eyebrow. "Secret Agent Lila Hart. I think I'm done with secrets," she said. "Ready for something more straightforward. Running a saloon, raising a certain boy who needs better guidance than the streets can provide. Building a life with a former drifter who's learning to stay put. That sounds like a fine plan." Cal stood, offering her his hand. "Shall we start with fixing those windows?" "Together?" she asked, though her smile said she already knew the answer. "Together," he confirmed. As they walked back into the Canary, Cal noticed his old saddle sitting in the corner, the one he'd always kept packed and ready for quick departure. Without hesitation, he picked it up and carried it to the storeroom. "Storing that away?" Lila asked. "For good," Cal said. "Man who stays doesn't need his saddle by the door." She kissed him then, there in the doorway of her saloon with half the town watching and cheering. Cal didn't care. Let them see. Let everyone know that the drifter had found his home. The sun was setting by the time order was fully restored. The federal marshals had departed with their prisoners. Promises of swift justice ringing in the air. The townspeople had begun the work of rebuilding boarding windows, tending wounds, comforting children frightened by the day's violence. Cal stood on the rise overlooking Jericho Wells, Lila beside him. The town looked different somehow, not physically, though there were scars from the battle. But there was a spirit in the air, a sense of possibility that hadn't been there before. "We did it," Lila said wonderingly. "We actually did it." "You did it," Cal corrected. 3 years of patient work, of careful planning. I just showed up at the end. "You showed up when we needed you most," she said. "When I needed you most, that's what matters." They stood in comfortable silence, watching their town, and it was theirs now, bought with courage and sealed with justice, settle into evening routines. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The railroad would send new representatives, hopefully honest ones this time. The dam would need proper inspection. The Santos family would need a new home. But those were tomorrow's problems. Tonight, there was peace in Jericho Wells. Tonight, a boy slept safe from those who would harm him. Tonight, the ghosts of Jacob Bennett and Tom Hart could rest easier knowing their killers would face judgment. "Come on," Lila said, tugging Cal's hand. "Dinner's waiting, and then I believe you promised to court me proper." "That I did," Cal agreed, following her back down the hill. "Starting with flowers, I believe." "Cal Bennett, if you pick those scraggly desert roses by the saloon, I'll shoot you myself." "Woman's got high standards," Cal complained to the sky. "Woman's got the right standards," she corrected. "Now come home." Home. The word settled into Cal's chest like a blessing. He'd ridden 1,000 miles looking for vengeance, only to find something better: redemption, community, love. The drifter who never stayed long had finally found his reason to remain. As they walked through the doors of the Canary, Toby waved from a table where Sister Mercy was teaching him his letters. Samira raised a glass in salute. Atsa nodded from his corner, that knowing smile suggesting he'd seen this ending coming all along. Cal surveyed the scene, his people, his place, his purpose, and felt the last of the restlessness that had driven him for 5 years finally quiet. He was home, and he was never leaving again. The makeshift courtroom in the Jericho Wells Church was packed to the rafters. Every bench groaned under the weight of bodies, and people stood 3 deep along the walls, through the open windows. More townspeople gathered, craning their necks to hear Judge William Thornberry, specially appointed from the territorial court, sat behind a table Sister Mercy had covered with her best cloth. Cal stood at the back, rifle across his arms, watching for trouble. 3 days had passed since the federal marshals had taken Pike and Vale into custody, but their influence ran deep. Money could buy many things, including attempts at silencing witnesses. "The court calls Tobias Malone to testify," Judge Thornberry announced. Toby walked to the witness chair with his chin high, though Cal could see the tremor in his hands. The boy had insisted on wearing his best clothes patched but clean, and Lila had trimmed his unruly hair that morning. "Son," the judge said kindly, "do you understand the importance of telling the truth here today?" "Yes, sir. Sister Mercy explained about oath-taking and eternal consequences." A ripple of gentle laughter passed through the crowd. Even the judge smiled. "Very well. Tell us what you saw the morning Miguel Santos was shot." Toby's voice started shaky, but grew stronger as he spoke. He told of Pike's arrival, of Santos merely asking about wages, of the deputy drawing his gun without provocation. When the prosecuting attorney showed him Pike's pistol, Toby identified it without hesitation. "The defendant's attorney may cross-examine," Judge Thornberry said. Vale's lawyer, a slick man from Denver named Hartwell, approached Toby like a snake sizing up a mouse. Young man, isn't it true you work at the Canary Saloon? I shine shoes there. Yes, sir. A place of drinking and gambling. Hardly suitable for a child. Tell me, has Miss Hart ever given you whiskey? Objection, the prosecutor said. Relevance. Goes to the witness's environment and influences. Your Honor. Cal's hands tightened on his rifle. Beside him, Lila stood rigid with controlled anger. I'll allow it. The judge decided. But reach your point quickly, counselor. Miss Hart gives me milk, Toby said clearly, and makes sure I eat regular, and teaches me reading when she has time. She's better to me than— His voice caught. Better than anyone since my ma died. Hartwell's confident expression faltered. He tried another approach. You dislike Deputy Pike, don't you? He hit me, sir, right after he shot Mr. Santos. Hit me for telling what I saw. So you have reason to lie about him. Toby's young face flushed. I got reason to want him punished. Sure, but lying's a sin. Mr. Hartwell, my ma raised me better than that. The lawyer retreated, defeated by the simple honesty of a child. Other witnesses followed Santos himself, arm still bound but voice strong. Townspeople who'd seen Pike's reign of terror. Sister Mercy speaking quietly of families burned out and threatened. Then came Lila's turn. She walked to the witness chair with quiet grace, the evidence ledger in her hands. Cal had never been prouder of anyone in his life. State your name for the record, the prosecutor instructed. Lila Hart. I own the Canary Saloon and have lived in Jericho Wells for 6 years. Mrs. Hart, tell the court about this ledger. For the next hour, Lila laid out the evidence she'd gathered. Names, dates, amounts, crimes documented in careful detail. The crowd listened in growing outrage as the scope of the conspiracy became clear, not just Pike and Vale, but a network of corruption reaching to the railroad's highest offices. How did you obtain this information? Hartwell demanded on cross-examination. Various sources. Lila replied calmly. My late husband began the documentation. I continued his work. By spying, by pretending friendship with these men while secretly plotting against them. By seeking justice for murder, Mr. Hartwell. By protecting my community when the law wouldn't. So you admit to deception? Lila's eyes flashed. I admit to doing what was necessary to stop killers from operating with impunity. If that troubles you more than the murders themselves, perhaps you should examine your own conscience. The crowd murmured approval. Judge Thornberry gavelled for order, but Cal caught him hiding a smile. The most damning testimony came from an unexpected source. Atza entered the courtroom near the end of the day, accompanied by 2 young Navajo men. The healer rarely came to town functions, and his presence caused a stir. Your Honor, Atza said in his quiet way, my nephews have something to share. They witnessed the night Tom Hart died. The courtroom erupted. Hartwell leaped up, objecting loudly, but Judge Thornberry overruled him. The 2 young men told their story, how they'd been hunting near Devil's Canyon, how they'd seen riders force another man toward the cliff edge, how they'd heard the shot that sent Tom Hart plunging to his death. Can you identify any of these riders? The prosecutor asked. That one. The elder nephew pointed at Vale. The moon was bright. We saw his face when he lit a cigar after— Vale's composure finally cracked. He surged to his feet, face purple with rage. You can't trust them. They're Indians, for God's sake, probably drunk or— Mr. Vale. Judge Thornberry's gavel cracked like a gunshot. You will remain silent or be removed from this courtroom. But the damage was done. The mask had slipped, showing the ugly truth beneath. The jury members, 12 good men of the territory, looked at Vale with new understanding. Cal testified last, speaking simply about finding his brother's body, about the years of searching, about discovering the connection to Pike and Vale. He showed the photograph, the threatening letter, the initials that had led him here. Mr. Bennett. Hartwell tried one final gambit. You've admitted to killing 2 men in your search for vengeance. Why should this jury trust the word of a vigilante? Cal met the lawyer's gaze steadily. Because I'm not seeking vengeance anymore. I'm seeking justice. There's a difference. Is there? You nearly killed Deputy Pike in the street 3 days ago? Nearly? Cal agreed. But I didn't. Because someone reminded me that we're supposed to be better than the men we fight. That's why we're here. In this courtroom. Instead of settling this with guns. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they filed back in, not a sound disturbed the packed church except the whisper of breathing and the rustle of fabric. On the charge of murder in the first degree, the foreman announced, "We find Horace Vale guilty." The courtroom exploded in cheers. Vale sat frozen, disbelief etched on his face. Pike, tried separately, received the same verdict an hour later. Gentlemen. Judge Thornbury addressed the convicted men. You have been found guilty of murder, conspiracy, and numerous lesser crimes by the authority vested in me by the territory of New Mexico. I sentence you both to hang by the neck until dead. Sentence to be carried out at sunrise, 3 days hence. Cal felt no satisfaction at the words, only a weary sense of completion. It was done. Jacob could rest. Outside the church, the town celebrated. Samira had brought out her accordion, and impromptu dancing broke out in the street. Children who'd hidden in fear now played freely. The shadow that had lain over Jericho Wells was lifting. You did it, Santos said, pumping Cal's hand with his good arm. You brought us justice. We all did it, Cal corrected. Together. He found Lila standing apart from the celebration, looking up at the stars beginning to show in the desert sky. You all right? Tom would have been pleased, she said softly. 3 years of work, and it's finally over. Is it? Cal asked. The railroad will send new representatives. The town still needs protecting. She turned to him, a slow smile spreading across her face. Why? Mr. Bennett, are you suggesting you might stick around for the long term? Well, someone needs to keep an eye on things. Make sure young Toby grows up proper. Keep the Canary's new windows from getting broken. He pulled her close. Besides, I made promises about courtship. I'm a man of my word. That you are, she agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. They stood together, watching their town celebrate its freedom. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, rebuilding, healing, learning to trust again. But tonight was for joy, for dancing, for children laughing without fear. There's going to be an election, Sister Mercy said, approaching them. For a new sheriff, new town council. People are saying your name. Cal. Cal shook his head. I'm no lawman. Aren't you? The nun studied him shrewdly. You stood for justice. You protected the innocent. You chose law over vengeance. Sounds like a lawman to me. After she left, Lila squeezed his arm. Sheriff Bennett has a nice sound. Now hold on. The town needs good men. Cal, men who understand both justice and mercy. Men who will stand between the people and those who'd prey on them. She looked up at him. Men who stay. Cal considered it. He'd spent 5 years outside the law, hunting his brother's killers. Maybe it was time to try working within it, building something instead of tearing down. I'd need deputies, he said finally. Good ones, maybe Santos, when his arm heals, some of the younger miners who showed courage. And you'd need a home, Lila added innocently. Sheriff can't live in a boarding house. People need to know where to find him. Got someplace in mind. There's rooms above the Canary, plenty of space for a man to settle, maybe even... She paused, sudden shyness overtaking her. Maybe even a family someday. Cal's heart clenched at the possibility, a real life, a real future. Children growing up safe in a town their parents helped save. Lila Hart, Is that a proposal?" "It's a suggestion," she said primly. "Though if you're waiting for me to get down on one knee, you'll be waiting a long time." He laughed, spinning her into the street where couples were dancing to Samira's music. "Then I guess I'll have to do the proposing, when the time's right." "After a proper courtship," she reminded him. Of course, Sunday dinners and everything." They danced under the stars while the town celebrated around them. Toby darted between couples, chasing other children in some complicated game. Atsa sat with the elders, sharing stories. Sister Mercy supervised tables of food that had appeared as if by magic. This was what they'd fought for, not just justice for the dead, but life for the living, community, hope, a future worth building. As the evening wore on, Judge Thornberry approached Cal. "Mr. Bennett, a word." They stepped aside from the celebration. The judge was a spare man with intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "I've sent a full report to the territorial governor," Thornberry said. "This corruption goes high in the railroad company. There'll be a full investigation. More trials. We'll need witnesses, people willing to testify." "We'll be here," Cal assured him. "Good, because men like Vale and Pike are symptoms, not the disease. It'll take time to root out all the infection." He paused. "I understand you're being considered for sheriff." "So I'm told." "You'd have my endorsement. This territory needs lawmen who understand that justice and law aren't always the same thing, but should be." He offered his hand. "Think about it." After the judge left, Cal stood alone for a moment, absorbing the magnitude of what had happened. He'd come to Jericho Wells following a cold trail and a thirst for vengeance. He'd found so much more purpose, community, love. "Cal," Toby raced up, face flushed with excitement. "Miss Lila says I can help serve at the Canary tomorrow. Says I'm old enough to learn the business proper." "That's so." Cal ruffled the boy's newly short hair. "You remember what I taught you about watching people?" "Yes, sir. Read faces, not just words. Keep my ears open and my mouth shut. Never count money where folks can see." "Good boy. Now get back to the party before all the food's gone." Toby scampered off, and Cal smiled. The boy would be all right. They all would. The celebration continued late into the night, but eventually, people drifted home. Cal helped clean up, stacking benches and collecting forgotten items. The simple work felt good, felt real. He found Lila closing up the Canary, moving with the efficient grace he'd come to love. She'd changed from her court dress to her working clothes, but she'd never looked more beautiful to him. "Need help?" he offered. "Almost done." She paused in wiping down the bar. "Cal, what Thornberry said about more trials, more fighting." "We'll handle it," he said simply, "together." "Together," she agreed. "I like the sound of that." They finished the closing routine in companionable silence. As Lila reached for the lamp, Cal caught her hand. "Dance with me," he said. "One more time, without the audience." "There's no music." "Don't need any." They swayed together in the empty saloon, holding each other close. Through the windows, the town slept peacefully. Somewhere in the jail, 2 condemned men waited for sunrise and judgment. But here, in this moment, there was only the 2 of them and the promise of tomorrow. "I love you," Cal said quietly. "Thought you should know that, official-like." Lila pulled back to look at him, eyes bright with tears. "Oh, Cal, I love you too. Have since you caught that sign in the storm?" "That long?" "Maybe longer. Maybe I was just waiting for you to walk through that door." They kissed, sweet and sure, sealing promises that didn't need words. When they finally parted, both were breathing unsteadily. "Court me proper," Lila said with a shaky laugh. "But maybe don't take too long about it." "Yes, ma'am," Cal agreed. "Your wish is my command." "Good. Then wish me good night and let me get some sleep. Tomorrow's a new day, and we've got a town to rebuild." Cal walked her to the stairs leading to her rooms, stealing one more kiss before letting her go. As he stepped out into the night, he felt the weight of the future settling on his shoulders, but it was a good weight, one he was ready to carry. The stars wheeled overhead, ancient and unchanging. But Jericho Wells had changed. The drifter had changed. And sometimes, Cal thought, change was the most sacred form of justice. He headed for the boarding house, already planning tomorrow. There was work to be done, a town to protect, a woman to court, a life to build. The drifter, who never stayed long, had found his home at last. The spring rains had ended, leaving Jericho Wells washed clean and shimmering under the desert sun. 6 months had passed since the trials, and the town bore little resemblance to the fearful place Cal had first encountered. New businesses lined Main Street. The school had proper walls instead of canvas, and children played freely in the dusty lanes. Cal stood on the porch of the sheriff's office, star pinned to his vest, watching the morning activity. The weight of the badge still felt foreign sometimes, but the town had voted overwhelmingly, and he'd accepted the responsibility. Santos served as his deputy, his arm fully healed and his family safely housed in one of the new cottages being built on the town's expanding edge. "Morning, Sheriff," Toby called out, hurrying past with an armload of books. The boy had sprouted 2 inches and now helped Sister Mercy with the expanded school in the mornings before his work at the Canary. "Morning, Toby. Those for the new library." "Yes, Sir Miss Lila ordered them special from Santa Fe." The boy grinned. "Including that one about horse training you wanted." Cal smiled as the boy rushed off. The library had been Lila's project, converting the old company store into a place of learning. "Knowledge is power," she'd said, "and we're going to make sure our people have both." Speaking of Lila, he could see her through the Canary's windows, directing the hanging of new curtains. They'd been properly courting for 6 months now. Sunday dinners at Martha's boarding house, evening walks along the creek, stolen kisses when they thought no one was watching. The whole town was waiting for him to propose, laying bets on when and how. They'd have to wait a bit longer. Cal had plans. "Sheriff Bennett," a nervous voice interrupted his thoughts. A young couple stood before him, travel-dusty and uncertain. "We heard this might be a good place to settle, that there's work and fair treatment." "You heard right," Cal assured them. "What's your trade?" "I'm a carpenter," the man said. "My wife's a seamstress." Both needed. "Santos can show you the land available for homesteading. First month's rent is waived for folks willing to help with community projects." As the couple walked away, hope lighting their faces, Cal reflected on how much had changed. The railroad had sent new representatives, honest ones this time, closely supervised by federal oversight. The mines operated fairly, with safety standards and decent wages. Jericho Wells was becoming what it had always promised to be, a place where people could build lives, not just survive. Busy morning. Lila appeared at his elbow, carrying 2 cups of coffee. She wore a green dress that brought out her eyes, and her hair was pinned up in a style that made Cal itch to take it down. "Getting busier," he said, accepting the coffee gratefully. 3 new families this week. Going to need more houses soon. Good thing we have a new carpenter." She leaned against the porch rail beside him. "Did you hear the territorial governor is coming next month? Wants to see our model town for himself." "Let him come. We've got nothing to hide." "No," Lila agreed softly. "No more secrets, no more fear. Just people building something good together." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the town wake up. Samira's hammer rang from the smithy. Atsa's nephew had opened a trading post, bridging the gap between the town and the Navajo communities. The mission bells chimed the hour, clear and true. "I've been thinking," Lila said eventually, "about the future, about what we're building here." "Oh, the Canary's doing well, better than ever, really, and with Toby learning the business, I have more time for other projects." She paused, gathering courage. Cal, I want to start a program for women, teaching them to read, to manage money, to run businesses. Too many depend entirely on men who might leave or die or prove unworthy. Like you depended on Tommy. I loved my husband, she said quietly. But when he died, I realized how little I truly knew about our finances, about the law, about protecting myself. I had to learn fast and hard. Other women shouldn't have to. Cal set down his coffee and took her hands. It's a fine idea. What do you need? Space, teachers, and... She met his eyes. Official support. Some men won't like their wives learning independence. Then they'll have to discuss it with the sheriff. Cal said firmly. This town thrives when all its people thrive. She kissed him then, right there on the main street in full view of everyone. Cal heard whistles and applause from the onlookers, but didn't care. Let them see. Let them know that their sheriff was completely, hopelessly in love with the saloon keeper who'd saved them all. Miss Lila. Toby's voice broke them apart. The boy stood there, red-faced but grinning. Sister Mercy says to tell you the ladies are gathering for the quilting bee, and she says to bring Sheriff Bennett because his opinion is needed on something. My opinion on quilting? Cal asked skeptically. Just come, Lila laughed, tugging his hand. The mission hall was full of women. Fabric spread across every surface. But when Cal entered, they all stopped working and turned to him with expectant faces. Sister Mercy stood at the center, trying to look innocent and failing entirely. Ladies, Cal said slowly, I'm sensing a conspiracy. Not at all, Martha Collins said brightly. We just need a man's perspective. Lila, dear, stand right there. Sheriff, you stand beside her. We need to see how you look together. How we look, Cal began, then stopped as understanding dawned. This isn't about quilting. Of course it is, Sister Mercy said with suspicious innocence. Wedding quilts are very important. We need to start early to have it ready in time. In time for what? Lila asked, though her cheeks had gone pink. Why, for your wedding. Dear, the whole town knows it's coming. We just want to be prepared. Cal looked at Lila, saw the mix of embarrassment and hope in her eyes, and made a decision. Well then, he said loudly, I guess I'd better do this proper. He dropped to one knee right there in the mission hall, pulling out the ring he'd been carrying for 2 weeks. The women gasped in unison, and Lila's hands flew to her mouth. Lila Hart, Cal said, voice carrying clear and strong. You saved my life in more ways than you know. You showed me that staying could be braver than leaving, that building is better than destroying, that love is the strongest justice of all. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Tears streamed down Lila's face, but she was smiling so bright it put the desert sun to shame. Yes, she said. Yes, Cal Bennett. I'll marry you. Though you realize this means you're stuck in Jericho Wells forever. No place I'd rather be stuck, he assured her, sliding the ring onto her finger. The mission hall erupted in celebration. Women who'd been pretending to quilt produced a feast from hidden baskets. Someone ran to ring the church bells, and soon half the town had crowded in to offer congratulations. About time, Samira declared, pounding Cal's back hard enough to bruise. I had money on last month, but better late than never. When? Sister Mercy asked, already making plans. Soon, Lila said, gazing at her ring, a simple gold band with a small turquoise stone. Before the governor visits, let him see what happiness looks like in our model town. The impromptu party lasted hours, spilling out into the street as more people joined. Cal found himself swept up in the planning apparently. A sheriff's wedding was a town affair, and everyone had opinions. As sunset approached, he managed to steal Lila away, walking her to the hill overlooking the town, the same spot where they'd stood after the trials, but now the view showed growth instead of scars. Happy? He asked, arm around her waist. beyond words. She replied, "Though I notice you trapped me properly. Public proposal in front of the town's biggest gossips. No backing out now. Learned from the best." Cal said, "Remember that locked door, obey me tonight. You said—" "And you did," she laughed. "You stayed. Despite everything telling you to run, you stayed." "Best decision I ever made." He turned her to face him. "Though I should warn you, I've been making plans too. That empty lot behind the cannery, I bought it." "Cal, what for?" "House. Our house. Nothing fancy, but solid. Room to grow. Maybe—" He touched her cheek gently. "Maybe rooms for children, if we're blessed that way." "Oh," she breathed. "Oh, Cal, yes, to all of it. House, children, future, yes." They kissed as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Below them, Jericho Wells settled into evening routines, families gathering for supper, shops closing, the cannery lighting its windows for the night crowd. "We should head back," Lila said eventually. "I still have a business to run." "And I have evening rounds." Cal agreed. "Though I suspect crime will be light tonight, hard to cause trouble when the whole town's celebrating." They walked back hand in hand, greeting neighbors and accepting more congratulations. At the cannery, they found Toby had already opened up, serving drinks with professional efficiency. "Congratulations, Miss Lila. Sheriff Cal," the boy said formally, then broke into a grin. "Does this mean I get to call you Pa now?" Cal's throat tightened. He hadn't considered that marrying Lila meant truly becoming part of Toby's life. "If you want to, son." "I want to," Toby said firmly. "Been wanting family again for a long time." "Then family you've got," Lila said, pulling the boy into a quick hug. "Now back to work. Those glasses won't fill themselves." As Toby scampered off, Cal marveled at how full his life had become. 6 months ago, he'd been alone, driven by vengeance, empty except for purpose. Now he had a town to protect, a woman to love, a boy to raise. The drifter had become a cornerstone. The night passed peacefully. Cal made his rounds, checking locks and watching for trouble that never came. The jail stood empty had been for weeks now, since most disputes were settled with words instead of fists. Even the saloon stayed calm, the celebration mood keeping spirits high but peaceful. He ended his circuit at the cannery just as Lila was closing up. Together they sat on the porch, watching the stars appear in the clear desert sky. "When I first saw you," Lila said, "caught in that dust storm, fighting with my sign, I thought you were just another drifter. They blow through like tumbleweeds, never staying long enough to matter. And now I know better. You weren't drifting, you were searching. And thank God your search led you here." Cal pulled out the old photograph of Jacob, studied his brother's face in the lamplight. For the first time in years, the pain had faded to a gentle ache. Justice had been served. The dead could rest. "I think he would have liked you," Cal said. "Jacob, he believed in building things, in community, in standing for what's right. Then we'll honor him by living those values." Lila said simply, "By making this town what he would have wanted, a place where justice and mercy walk hand in hand." Cal tucked the photograph away, no longer needing to carry it constantly. The past had its place, but the future beckoned brighter. "I found something today," Lila said, producing an old wooden box. "Hidden in the storeroom. Tom must have put it there." She opened it, revealing a pair of silver spurs, polished and beautiful. They were his father's. I think he'd want you to have them." Cal touched the spurs reverently. "I'll wear them with honor." "I know you will." She stood, stretching. "Now, Sheriff Bennett, I believe you have a dawn patrol, and I have a business to run tomorrow. We should get some sleep." "Separately," Cal said with exaggerated disappointment. propriety and all. For 3 more weeks. Lila laughed. Then you're stuck with me every night for the rest of your life. Can't wait, he said honestly. They parted with a kiss that promised everything to come. Cal walked to his room at the boarding house, but sleep eluded him. Instead, he sat by the window, planning the house he'd build, the life they'd make, the children who might run through these streets calling him Pa. The turquoise bear Atsa had given him sat on the windowsill, catching moonlight. The healer had spoken of choosing when to fight, when to build, when to stand alone, when to join together. Cal had made his choices, and they'd led him home. As dawn broke over the desert, painting the world in shades of possibility, Cal Bennett strapped on his gun belt and pinned on his star. But now he also wore Tom Hart's spurs, carrying forward the legacy of good men who'd stood for justice. He stepped out into the morning, breathing deep of the clean air. Somewhere, coffee was brewing. Children were stirring. His town was waking up to another day of peace and progress. In 3 weeks, he'd marry Lila Hart in the church Sister Mercy had helped build. Toby would stand as witness. The whole town would celebrate, and the drifter who'd never stayed long would put down roots so deep nothing could tear them loose. The morning sun climbed higher, warming the earth and chasing away shadows. Cal touched the brim of his hat to Mrs. Santos, sweeping her new porch. He helped old Pete load supplies at the general store. He checked on the progress of the new schoolhouse, where Toby would learn alongside children who no longer lived in fear. This was what staying looked like. This was what love had built. And as Cal Bennett walked the streets of Jericho Wells, spurs ringing with each step, badge catching the light, he knew he'd never hear the call of the distant horizon again. He was home. The drifter had finally learned to stay. And in staying, he'd found everything worth living for: love, purpose, family, and a future as bright as the desert stars. The story of the drifter who never stayed long had ended. The story of Sheriff Cal Bennett, husband, father, protector, and builder, had just begun. And it was going to be a good one. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect and share our thoughts about Cal and Lila's journey. If you enjoyed this tale from the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Night. Give this video a like, and hit that hype button to help more people discover these stories. Your support means the world and keeps these campfire tales alive. Until next time, partners.